Hello everyone, thanks for joining us. I just wanted to give you a bit of a rundown. There's a few things to talk about today. So firstly, I've got Assistant Commissioner Cheryl Scanlon and Superintendent Dave Maganti here. How we'll run today is we'll talk about some youth justice things, Operation Uniform Theta, of course the very tragic events at North Lakes, and Assistant Commissioner Scanlon, as also Head of Ethical Standards Command, can address questions around the death in police custody overnight. And we are getting close to New Year's celebration, so Superintendent Dave Maganti, who's the Operations Commander for New Year's Eve, will also touch on some matters around police preparedness and community safety messages. So we'll make some remarks about those subjects. I'll then invite any questions for Dave Maganti, and then we'll take other questions on those other issues. So I want to firstly start off by saying we've seen yet again another horrific and tragic event happen, senseless. Words can't describe obviously the grief the community's experiencing, but also the family, the friends, the loved ones of Emma Lavelle. And we're very sad that this tragedy's happened, obviously, and thoughts are with the Lavelle family, the friends and the community who very dearly loved Emma. You can see that through social media commentary and other public commentary. It's a senseless act, and obviously condemn in the strongest possible terms the violence and the crime that's happened. And I know that police are working very hard to ensure that all the evidence is available to be presented to the court to ensure that justice is done in this matter. Assistant Commissioner Scanlon can address some more particular matters about that particular investigation, but I'm sure everyone will also appreciate that as the matter is still subject to police investigation and before the courts, we are limited at this time about some of the detail that we can provide. There is also some additional work being done at the moment around proactive patrols and high visibility policing when it comes to community safety. It was only a week ago that I joined Deputy Commissioner Mark Wheeler in launching Operation Uniform Theta, a proactive high visibility police operation right across the state in key hotspot locations to put police in places to prevent crime, to assist in supporting community safety. I wanted to provide an update on that particular operation. This is an operation that runs from last week until the 31st of January, and already we've had almost 2,700 proactive activities over that period of time, and 415 offenders charged on almost 1,000 offences. So I commend police for their efforts in respect of those high visibility proactive patrols, and encourage anyone in the community who sees anything happening in their community to contact police and provide that information to police so that police can undertake activities to support community safety. We have also seen over the reforms that the government's delivered over the last few years an increase in the number of young people who are being held in custody for longer. And there are some people who have criticised that approach. They've criticised the approach that we are putting too many young people into custody, that too many young people are going into custody for longer. But my view and the view of the government is very clear on that, and that is there has to be consequence for action, and there also has to be an opportunity for the community to be protected from serious offenders. And one way to protect the community and to provide consequence for action is to ensure that young people are detained in custody. So we've seen, as a result of the presumption against bail, which means that our youth bail laws are the strongest in the nation, that there's been a significant increase in the number of young people who are held in custody as a result of those law changes. In fact, I've got some data here that shows that it's increased by over 100%, the number of young people who are refused bail at their first appearance. That means more young people in custody more often. We've also seen, as a result of the associated proactive activities that police and other government agencies have been funded to do, an increase in the number of activities around bail compliance, as well as also prevention and early intervention. And just in the last 12 months or so, we've seen over 17,000 bail compliance activities conducted by police, a significant increase from previous years. So there is obviously activity happening in respect of supporting community safety outcomes, and I want to acknowledge the efforts of police and other government agencies in doing that. But I also want to acknowledge that there is instances where crime, despite the best efforts of everyone, happens, and it has tragic and confronting and distressing outcomes. And we've got to condemn that in the strongest possible terms. These things, no one wants to happen. Everyone is on the same page when it comes to community safety. We want safe communities. We want perpetrators of crime to be held to account. We want them to be apprehended as quickly as possible, and we want there to be deterrence and punishment for people who seek to commit crime and harm communities. And once again, I want to acknowledge the efforts of the police and support agencies in working very hard to support community safety outcomes. I'll now hand over to Assistant Commissioner Scanlon to talk about the very tragic events yesterday, uniform theta, and obviously if there are any questions around the death in police custody. Thanks, Assistant Commissioner.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for making your time available this afternoon. I want to firstly offer my condolences to the Lavelle family for the loss of their beloved wife and mother, Emma. This is a terrible tragedy for the family, and there continues to be every support offered to them by many. This has been a very confronting incident for the local residents, for the community, and also for first responders who were involved in that incident on the evening of the 26th of December. Last night, police charged a 17-year-old Zilmere boy and a 17-year-old Holland Park boy with 1 count each of murder, attempted murder and enter dwelling with intent in company. The other 2 teenage boys that were in police custody, a 17-year-old and a Narangba boy and a 16-year-old Zilmere boy, were charged with 1 count of stealing in relation to a separate incident which occurred shortly after midday on Monday the 26th of December. They've both been released on bail, those 2 lesser matters, and expected to appear in the Caboolture Children's Court at a later date. As you can appreciate, we are talking about 17-year-olds and 1 16-year-old here. These are not young children. These are youths that are in the upper age range for those that are classed as youth by law in Queensland. Police will allege that around 11:30 p.m. on Monday, the 26th of December, husband and wife were alerted to a dog, via a dog, that intruders had gained entry to their home, and they came out of their bedroom and a confrontation with 2 people occurred in the entryway of the home, which moved out into the front yard. As we now know, both the husband and wife sustained stab wounds and the tragic loss of life occurred of Emma. As you are also aware, their 2 teenage daughters were present. Thankfully, those young ladies were unharmed, but as you can appreciate, very traumatised by those events, and all support is being offered to the children. Part of the investigation involves a multifaceted approach by a range of investigators and specialists. This occurs in any homicide investigation, whether it's adults or children involved. So I certainly want to make mention of the teams that have worked on this job thus far, and it's an ongoing, we are not at 48 hours yet into the investigation. So certainly investigators from the Moreton District, from the CIB and the Child Protection Investigation Unit up in that part of the Moreton District are involved. The Homicide Squad from the Crime and Intelligence Command. We have had our forensic officers, scenes of crime officers and forensic officers process the crime scene at that residence, which has now been finalised. But there are many lines of inquiry that have to be followed over the coming days and weeks. And whilst I can't go into those matters specifically, we have all resources that are necessary to conduct an investigation of this size up and running, and as I say, it's only early days, we're only less than 48 hours in. That's really all I need to say about those particular matters for now, and I won't comment further on the specifics because they are charged, they are matters before the court, and it would be inappropriate for me to take that any further. I just want to reiterate many of the things that, whilst I've been head of the Youth Justice Task Force over the last 2 years, almost, not quite 2 years, about youth crime, these are complex and multifaceted issues, and this conversation is important for the community. Youth crime is as complex an issue as some of the things that we see in domestic violence and other wicked problems in the community. And those things are not fixed overnight, and they will take considerable effort by all agencies and everyone in the community. These events are nothing any of us want to see. They affect all of us when it happens. And as the Minister alluded to, everybody wants the same thing here, and that is a safe community. I don't have any further to add on that. Just to confirm that the proactive operation that the Minister has alluded to in Operation Theta, which commenced on the 19th of December, that's a very important operation for us because that is about proactive responses by police and additional resources in the way of additional shifts through overtime provided to police to be out and doing high visibility patrols and particularly targeting areas where young people gather. As you heard, that was announced with Deputy Commissioner Wheeler some days ago, and the areas that have been targeted for that operation, already we're seeing some good results out of Far North, Townsville, Mount Isa, Darling Downs, Brisbane, both districts, North and South Side, and the Moreton district. So I'm very pleased with that operation so far, and as I said, most important because when you have not only a holiday season and lots of visitors, we have much more movement in the community of young people as well. So we're very grateful for that resource to help us run a proactive operation through the holiday period. I might just pause there and just to comment on another matter. My substantive portfolio is Head of Ethical Standards Command, and we are currently dealing with a death in custody that the Minister alluded to earlier overnight. Those matters are under investigation. Police were called to deal with an incident in Fortitude Valley. QAS were also called to assist police, and a gentleman was transported by police and sadly had some further medical issues, and QAS were again called and he has sadly passed away. So we are dealing with that, which is normal for part of the work that we do in Ethical Standards Command is to oversight the actions of our officers with oversight from the CCC and reporting to the State Coroner. So those matters continue under investigation today by my officers in Ethical Standards, and there's not a lot of detail I can give you about that other than to confirm that it is an ongoing investigation for us. So thank you.
Finally, Dave, and then any questions for Dave. We'll then take questions on the other matters.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. Good afternoon. I'm providing a quick briefing on New Year's Eve planning for this Saturday night. The service is expecting this New Year's Eve to be much, much busier than the last couple, obviously with all the restrictions from COVID and so on over the last couple of years. We're expecting big crowds in and around the city. We're expecting big crowds at South Bank within the city area and down in the Safe Night Precinct down in Fortitude Valley. So we will operate the State Police Operations Centre upstairs in this building to coordinate across those three areas to give us a high level of coordination across those areas, situational awareness, all the feeds from all the cameras and so on. So we're looking forward to a really big crowd. We're encouraging everyone to get out and have a good night, but we are asking a few critical things of people who are going out on Saturday night. Please make yourself aware with what is happening in and around Brisbane. The Brisbane City Council website, the Queensland Police website, the South Bank website all have really good information in relation to street closures, parking restrictions, restrictions on entering areas such as South Bank and all those sort of processes. So know what's going on before you come into the city. Make yourself familiar with that sort of information. Plan your transport ahead where you can. The second thing is critically road safety. If you're going out, plan ahead, plan your transport, plan your safety. Do not drink and drive. Do not be out on the roads creating an unsafe environment for yourself or for other road users. Nobody wants to be knocking on someone's door on New Year's Day to deliver a message that someone's been seriously injured or worse. Our people especially don't want to do that, and we don't want any families receiving those sort of messages. The third one is safety in crowded spaces. South Bank in particular, later on in the night down in the Safe Night precinct. There will be long queues. Patients will be required to get into premises to get transport home and those sorts of things. We don't want to see aggression. We don't want to see alcohol-fuelled violence. We want to see people staying calm, enjoying their night and getting home safely. And that involves both road safety and safety in public spaces. We don't want to have people getting seriously injured or worse as a result of road trauma or as violence in crowded spaces at nightclubs and so on. So that's the messaging that we're trying to push out to everyone. We're confident that we have resourced well, we've looked at security, we've got good plans in place, and we're going to deliver, hopefully, a great environment for everyone to have a great night on Saturday night. Thanks, Mr.
Anything to... thanks, Dave.
Cheers, thank you.
Who do you want first?
Thank you. Sure, that's
Sure.
okay. I know you said there wasn't a lot you could add in terms of investigation, but I'll ask anyway. The issue of the knife, is it going to be alleged that it was brought with the alleged offenders or from the house?
That's part of our lines of inquiry. Obviously there's a weapon involved here. We've got people who've sustained stab wounds, and so that is part of the lines of inquiry that have to be followed about where the knife came from. So yes, absolutely, it's part of the investigation at the moment.
You mentioned that the issues with youth crime can't be solved overnight, and the reality is now, how do the community feel safe given a woman's been attacked and killed in her own home? Is there more we can be doing right now to ensure people do feel safe?
Look, absolutely. It's important for the community to have conversations about these things, about home security, about some of the things that we've talked very openly about with youth crime. And it's not just youth who commit these types of crimes either, in terms of burglaries and stealing motor vehicles. We've got adults who are doing that. I think it becomes more polarised, particularly because it is a focus of the media and because young people gravitate to social media to publicise that. But home security is important. It's a conversation we all need to have. It's a conversation I have with my family and friends because it is important to all of us. And it is devastating. There is no doubt about it. No doubt about when terrible events like this happen, including for our own department as recently as weeks ago. These things and violence perpetrated against anyone is very confronting. But we have work to be done, and this is there will be ongoing work around what needs to occur with youth crime. So we've spent the last couple of years shifting a system to a new level with some of the things that need to happen, but that work is ongoing and needs to continue.
Is it your assessment at your time of the job that youth crime is actually getting better despite isolated incidents? Do you think it is in fact better than what it was a few years ago?
Look, I think it's incredibly challenging. I have to say, after 35 years of policing, and I said that from day one, it would be one of the toughest jobs I would do in my career, and it absolutely is, because when you look at what young people have access to these days, these things are a case in point how young people live their lives, the things that they're exposed to, the level of violence that has been normalised in our community in many respects, in my opinion, makes it very, very challenging working with young people. But do I think we've made some improvements? Yes, I do. And the reason I say that is that when I look at the population of young people in Queensland, as I spoke to the media about recently, when I look at almost 80,000 extra in the population between 10 and 17 as at June this year, and I see 4,000 almost less young people in the system over 10 years. That's quite remarkable. But the job is not done yet about young people who behave in a way that is serious offending, and it is no different. It is serious criminal offending. That work must continue, and we must stay on the course that we're on, and we have to continue to do the work that we've laid out and more.
Are those Operation Feather patrols taking place at North Plains?
Look, they're in a range of areas up at Moreton, so I can't specifically talk to that, but they've certainly had access to that opportunity to have extra shifts across the Moreton area.
Now, how many of the murder accused were on bail?
Look, I'm not going to comment on that today, nor am I going to comment on any other specifics of the lines of inquiry. But as I said, these things are about the young people concerned. Why were they? Some of the things that we have to examine is why were they in that street? Why did they go to that house? And we know there is no connection between these young people and the occupants. But that's all part of the lines of inquiry, and what led up to them being there over the days and weeks prior to this event.
Doesn't the public have a right to know if they're on bail?
Look, there are provisions under the legislation, as you well know, under the youth justice laws and other provisions here in Queensland, and that prohibits some of that discussion. So I'm not going to comment on that today, but it is part of our line of inquiry about how those young people that have been charged found their way to that residence.
If juveniles are under a curfew, do police check if they're abiding by that curfew?
Yes, we do.
Is the home invasion believed to be gang-related?
Look, that's not, that is examined, but in this case, there is nothing at this stage to provide information to me about that. But it is one of the lines of inquiry that we will have a look at.
You mentioned home security. I mean, what more can people do? Do you saying that things like cameras can help prevent gangs going in times with knives?
Look, we know the tremendous evidence we get from CCTV. We solve a lot of matters through CCTV and other dash cams, telephones, people that film things. So the technology that's available today, and certainly people do invest in that for home security, quite apart from the usual ensuring, doors are locked and home security and those things. They're normal things that we certainly discuss with the community as police. It's part of our job around crime prevention as well. But the other most important part about this work is about focusing on the young people that are cause the most harm in the community, and what else we can do to minimise that.
As you probably appreciate, there's a lot of people that are getting frustrated by break-ins, and some are creating vigilante groups to try and defend their properties. What would your message be to them? Look,
it's not what we encourage at all. Ring 000, ring the police. That's what we're there for. We've seen tragic events occur from vigilantism. Part of the reason this task force began resulted from a particular scenario in Townsville where that occurred and caused a terrible tragedy. So we don't encourage that at all, but we encourage people to ring 000 and call the police immediately. And in this case, certainly last night, on the night of the 26th, I certainly want to commend the first responders to this job. Specialists like our dog squads, our first responders saturating an area, some very good police work done to capture the young people involved here. So we encourage people to do that. Pick up the phone and ring 000, that's what we're there for.
You're not limited to say what kind of knife was used?
No, I can't at this stage.
Is there multiple weapons?
That's part of the line of inquiry.
Minister, if we could ask a couple of big questions.
Thank you.
Finish with Cheryl too.
Yeah,
thank you.
In instances past, notable crimes, Matthew Field and Kate Ledbetter, instances like that, there's been tinkering with the youth justice system. You've come out. It initially said it's as strong as it needs to be, and there's usually tinkering and some changes. Are you happy now that you've got the Youth Justice Act as it needs to be to deal with things going forward, or are we likely to see some more changes?
I don't think any government or any parliament will ever say laws will never change again. It's a reflection of community, the laws that are passed, and certainly one reason why the laws that were passed in recent times was because of community feedback, community expectation around stronger deterrence and harsher approaches. And I mentioned it before, the government's been criticised since those changes around more young people being in custody for longer. But it's my firm belief that helps keep the community safe. It's one way of disrupting the offending of particular offenders. So it would be naive of anyone to think that governments or parliaments would never change laws again, but certainly the government has toughened laws in recent times. Those laws are amongst the toughest in the nation, and they are having an impact on the number of young people in custody.
Are you satisfied where the laws are at as it stands?
Well, it's a similar answer. The government's been criticised for the laws that we've had. There was many major media publications who had commentary around that. But what we're seeing with those laws is more young people in custody for longer, which is disrupting their offending. And I believe that reflects community expectations around consequence for offending.
The opposition is obviously calling for one of their policies that they've been asking for a long time, breach of bail, returning as an offence. Is that something that you will now look at? And more broadly, they're calling for a complete overhaul of the youth justice system. Is that practical? Is that something that you would look at?
Yeah, look, you know, it's a similar question. You know, I think it's best to look at what the experts say around that proposal, and it was only last month that a very esteemed former police officer, Bob Atkinson, said that that proposal, you know, doesn't make sense, doesn't work. You know, when it was around, didn't have any impact on reducing offending, you know, didn't lead to anyone additionally going into custody, and in fact was criticised by the Children's Court in their report, and there's some commentary in that 2013-14 Children's Court report that says that it actually led to less time in custody. So I think we've got to be really careful that when we're having conversations around how to deal with a very complex, challenging issue, that we acknowledge that it's complex and challenging. And I don't want that to sort of take away at all from, you know, the very personal impact that people have when they are affected by crime. You know, there's been the most devastating and traumatic impact by a family, you know, in the last 48 hours. So in no way at all do we want to not acknowledge that and not elevate that that is a tremendously impactful and tragic event for that family and their family and loved ones. But it would be, you know, it would be naive for people to think that there is a simple solution to a complex issue.
It's a hard sell, but is it an uncomfortable truth that people have to just reconcile that sometimes bad things happen and that you can't be reactionary to every crime?
I don't think we should ever accept that proposition, though. We should never accept that. I firmly believe everyone is on the same page on this, and that is we want a safe community, that, you know, we don't want crime to happen, that we want everyone to be safe. I think everyone wants that. And that's what's motivated the Parliament and the government to introduce laws that we have. But it is a challenging issue, it's a complex issue. And like the Assistant Commissioner said, there are other challenging issues like domestic violence that require holistic and system response. It's not just a police issue, it's not just a law issue. There are issues that go back, in fact, generations, that impact people's lives today, that mean that they may have complexity in their lives that might manifest itself in criminal offending. It's a difficult issue.
Minister, you say we all want a safe community. Is that you saying the community at present isn't safe?
Well, whenever crime is happening, there is an impact on the community. You know, so any instance of criminal offending means that the community is impacted and is less safe than it should be. And we all want the community to be more safe than it is today.
You talk about the advice of experts and the fact this does need to be a multifaceted approach to a solution. Donna Gates, a local politician down on the Gold Coast, says that she'd like to see a round table, everyone come together, I guess maybe similar to the housing summit, and talk about what we're going to do here. Would that be something the government would be open to? Yeah,
I know Donna, you know, and I know, you know, Tom Tate, and he's a mate of mine. We talk about lots of issues all the time. I don't think necessarily we need to have, you know, more roundtables or more talk fests on things. You know, action gets taken, action's been taken around tougher laws, and action continues to be taken around investing in other strategies, like one of the operations we just heard about now, Operation Uniform Theta. But that does not mean people should not be contributing to the conversation. You know, so if people have, you know, a valuable contribution to make, they should make it.
Minister, doesn't Ms Lovell's murder indicate that the laws as they stand aren't working, given that at least one of the accused were on bail?
Yeah, look, and the Assistant Commissioner's addressed, you know, an aspect of your question there around what we can say now and what we can't say now, and there's a full investigation underway. There are strong laws in place, amongst the strongest in the nation. The police dedicate themselves to certain activities around youth offending, and there's a current operation now which is around enhanced proactive and high visibility work. There's also significant other investment in other agencies to do things. So long as crime is still happening, so long as there is one instance of criminal offending, I don't think anyone should ever give up. The government shouldn't give up, the Parliament shouldn't give up, the community shouldn't give up. So we should continue to work hard to address this very wicked problem.
Appreciate you can't go into specific case, but at government-funded youth houses, is it practice to have a carer there supervising the youth?
I don't have specific portfolio responsibility for the youth justice system. That's the Minister for Youth Justice around that, but it is my understanding, yes, that there are a number of funded services which are funded to have staff to supervise and engage with young people.
Should Queenslanders be concerned if they're living near this housing?
There's varieties of housing right across the state in many different ways. There's mansions and unit blocks and social housing, and there are housing for people who experience child abuse. That happens right across the state. There's housing for people with disability. There's housing for people who are aged and infirm. One of the strengths of our society is that we don't have neighbourhoods which are exclusively, one way or another. We are a multifaceted, multicultural, very diverse society. So right across the state there's diversity of housing. And right across the state there are many neighbourhoods which live in peace and harmony and get on with their neighbours.
Assistant Commissioner, can I just ask you if...
Is there any more for me? Or no? Okay, sure.
At home for youth, is it your understanding that a carer was there at the time?
Look, I'm not going to... Those matters are under investigation, as I've said earlier, about we need to know why the young people were in that street at that particular hour on that particular night, and that's under investigation. They're not matters that I'm going to comment on today. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.